Well, welcome back to Preservation Travels here at our Restoration Nation with Lane and Kevin. Today, we're in beautiful, historic St. Augustine, Florida. We have an amazing treat for you today here in St. Augustine. St. Augustine, founded in 1565 by the Spanish. This city is the oldest continuously occupied city in the United States, occupied by both European and African settlers. So the history here is absolutely tangible, and we have the great delight, joy, honor, privilege of bringing you one of the older homes here in the city today. The section that I'm standing in was built in 1789, 1790. So it's the same age as our Hope Farm, but the architecture is completely different. We can't wait to take you inside and show you the things that make this home uniquely St. Augustine. Well, I had to bring you inside to show you on this main floor especially some of the spectacular architectural features that are seen. Some of these are seen throughout the Spanish territories, and some of these are seen only here in St. Augustine. And this is one of the most special and spectacular features of this home. This portion of the home was built 1789, 1790 during the Spanish territorial period. And one of their favorite building materials was the local coquina, which is basically shells densely packed that have sort of stuck together with clay and almost fossilized. It makes it incredibly stable building material. It's mined locally. So you see a multitude of buildings of this period built out of this local coquina. Now, above me are these amazing hand-hewn beams. You can actually see the marks on these beams where they were hand-hewn. The builders, when they were preparing these logs, would hatch into the logs straight down, a series of cuts straight in, and then they would come along and hack those off at an angle. So we can still see all of those angled cuts on these beams. Underneath us, we have these beautiful flagstones that are in some of the original part of the house. We have both the original front and back door. Now, while I'm in this front part of the house, it feels like looking out over the bay, over the beautiful courtyard. This is the front. You would park, you would come in off of the street, and this is now functionally the front of the home. But this home was built during a time when the Spanish building here were still operating under the law of the Indies. It was written in 1573, and it said that in all of the Spanish territories, the homes that were built in Spanish platted cities, platted in peones, not lots, had to be built with the property right on the road. So what was originally the front of the home sits directly on the road. The backyard was reserved for a courtyard, and the law of the Andes says it is for cleanliness, for livestock. Everything was to take place in the backyard. But the reasons the homes sat shoulder to shoulder, they literally touched one another, and if they didn't touch one another, they were to have a masonry or brick wall to connect one another, was for fortification. So the private homes were used as fortifications as well. So I wanted to give you a closer look at the style of building that we see here with the coquina. It is not built in a traditional masonry pattern. We don't have a common brick bond being used here. You'll see it's almost like a game of modern Tetris, where little pieces have been dropped in to fit and form where they need to go to make this straight wall. So look at this piece here, how it fits together. This small piece. We have another piece here, a tiny, tiny little piece of coquina that's been inserted to give us that stability. So this wall gives us a beautiful picture of how these blocks were mined, how they were hewn, and how they were put together, but it stood the test of time. One of my favorite things about this oldest part of the home is the fact that all of these early building elements are exposed. Every single window and door has its header exposed. And this one especially, you can really see the hatch marks from the axe. I love this beam above me. You can see both the hatch marks from the axe, but also the knots where the original limbs were coming out of this cypress beam. So we are truly looking at a piece of building material that was put here almost 300 years ago and has remained the same. Something you'll notice about these though, they are very crudely finished. In some of our other Spanish territorial homes that we've looked at, the beams on the ceiling were meant to be exposed just like these were, but they were very finely finished. Once they were hewn, they were planed down and the edges were beaded. That's something that was done at the same time this house was being built, 1780 to 1790. But this is a much more crude form of construction, and you can see we were trying to get it built, we were trying to get it built quickly and get people living here to keep this city safe. This is my favorite thing. Of a home that has many favorite things in it, this is my favorite thing. This is the kind of thing that I absolutely geek out over. This is the original front door from 1789, 90. I want you to look at the ornamental ironwork that's on this door. It is absolutely exquisitely and finely done. You can see that decorative elements were absolutely given thought when this house was being built. And I love the locking mechanism. Not only do we have this enormous carpenter's lock, we have a lock high, a lock low, and then a slip lock along with it. This home was built to be a fortress. You have to remember, this is a city of 8 flags. So the French, the British, the Spanish, then the American colonies, people kept fighting over St. Augustine, who would own St. Augustine. So defense and fortification were very important. And this door is a nearly 300-year-old testament to that reality. It's hard to believe, I know, but here in the kitchen and in the dining room opposite, we have original shutters with beautiful heart-shaped hinges, locking mechanisms. They still operate absolutely beautifully, like they would have done in 1780, 1790. Now, I love this kitchen. They've done a really, really sensitive job of integrating a modern kitchen with appliances that look like they're from the earliest era that we would have had an indoor kitchen in this space. So I love the appliances they've used, and I absolutely love the use of what appears to be a Tennessee marble with a leathered finish. It mimics beautifully both the coquina on the walls and this gorgeous flagstone underfoot. So this kitchen doesn't stand out. It isn't jarring. It isn't glaring. It isn't an uncomfortable modern space in an ancient home. This is the way that you do a kitchen in a property of this age. So this home is fascinating in that through the late part of the 18th century and all of the 19th century, it remained the same. It was a single-story dwelling, what you see here. Then in the early 20th century, 1910 and 1914, we had two additions on top of us, the second floor and third floor. Now we're going to take you up there and show you these beautiful spaces. They have been heavily renovated to be modern, comfortable living spaces, but you will continue to see absolutely gorgeous historic features and a view that will take your breath away. And while you look at these spaces, I'm going to share with you a little bit more about the history of St. Augustine itself and this incredible property. So come along on a little more of the journey with me.
"71 Marine Street stands on property that was granted in 1794 to Jose Antonio Coruna, one of the farmers from the Canary Islands who was brought to St. Augustine during the Second Spanish period in the hope of making the community self-sufficient agriculturally. Coruna built a house on part of the land and sold off the rest. On September the 30th of 1799, he sold the property, complete with, quote, "a stone house covered with shingles I have constructed at my own expense," unquote, to Antonia Perdón, wife of Fernando de la Maza Arredondo, a leading merchant and future city councilman. So the extant house at 71 Marine Street, at least its first floor section, was constructed by 1799. In 1804, Perdomo sold the house for 1,800 pesos to Charles Gobert, a merchant from New York who sought his fortune in Florida, heavily investing his wife's money in real estate. He went bankrupt in New York in 1812, but the St. Augustine property, being then in another country, could not be taken for the settlement. However, some of the houses he bought were destroyed by the hurricane of 1811, considerably diminishing the value of the investment. In the long run, however, he managed to increase his wife's $6,000 fortune to nearly $15,000 by the time of the change of the flags to American rule in Florida. It put his property here within reach of his creditors, necessitating very complicated legal transactions. By 1873, the home was owned by Judge John G. Long, a native of Wilmington, North Carolina, who came to St. Augustine after the Civil War and became a major property owner here. Active in politics, he served as Republican National Committeeman from Florida. In 1899, President McKinley appointed him the Consul General in Cairo, a position he held until his death. Like much of his property, the house at 71 Marine Street was rented out to African American people. Many African Americans lived on Marine Street at this time. An 1886 photograph shows this as a deteriorated one-story coquina building with a wood-shingled gabled roof, having 3 doors and 2 windows along Marine Street, and an African American family in residence. The 1885 City Directory lists an African-American boatman, Henry Glover, living on Marine Street. No address is specified, but this is likely the location as the boat basin was only a few feet southeast of the house, and birth records show he had several children with approximate ages of those shown in the picture. He later moved to Lincolnville, a predominantly African-American community, and became a building contractor. The Marine Street house remained old and vacant for some years, but between 1910 and 1914, the then owners, the Dewhurst family, had it remodeled and enlarged. They turned the single-story structure into a story and a half above the original coquina section and transformed it into a stylish bayfront cottage. The Dewhurst additions to the property have created the beautiful bayfront property that we see today.
We hope you've enjoyed this look inside 235 years of St. Augustine history, of Spanish territory history of the United States, and one of the most unique and spectacular homes on one of the most unique and spectacular streets, I think, in the entire country. Now remember, we're not the real estate agents. We do not represent this house in any way. We cannot guarantee it, and we can't really give you any more information on it. But if you think this home might be the home for you, you can reach Frank the Realtor through the Zillow link in our description below. Reach out to him. He can tell you all the additional details about how you could become the next caretaker of this spectacular property, loaded with history, loaded with charm, and giving you one of the best views in the United States. Farewell from the oldest city here in the United States of America. We'll see you next time on Preservation Travels with Lane and Kevin at our Restoration Nation.